So picture this. How do you win a battle when you're completely outnumbered, totally outgunned, and you're so sick you can't even stand up? It sounds impossible, right? Well, today we're going to dive into one of history's most incredible stories of leadership and strategy, and it all centers around one man, Lachit Borphukan. And it all kind of starts with this thing right here, a 350-year-old traditional Ahom sword called a hangdong. Today, it's safe behind glass in a museum in Assam. But back in the 17th century, this sword was right in the middle of a battle that would decide the fate of an entire kingdom and stop one of the world's most powerful empires dead in its tracks. So who was Lachit Borphukan, really? And how on earth did he lead his people to a victory so massive, so important, that we're still talking about it, and giving out national awards and building giant statues nearly 400 years later? Let's find out. Okay, to really get why this battle was so incredible, we first have to understand the sheer desperation of the moment. The Ahom Kingdom, which was in the Brahmaputra Valley, was facing a truly existential threat from the ridiculously powerful Mughal Empire. Things went south unbelievably fast. You had a devastating Mughal invasion in 1662, which led to this absolutely humiliating treaty just 1 year later. But the Ahoms weren't going to take that lying down. By 1667, a new general, our guy Lachit Borphukan, leads this daring counterattack and takes back the vital city of Guwahati. Well, this act of defiance made the Mughal emperor furious, so he sends a colossal army to just crush them once and for all. The stage was set for an epic showdown. And you have to understand, this wasn't just about territory. It was personal. It was about honor. The Ahom king at the time, Jayadwaj Singha, literally died in despair after signing that treaty. And on his deathbed, he begged his successor to remove the spear of humiliation from the bosom of the nation. Wow. That one line tells you everything you need to know about the emotional weight behind this resistance. This was a fight for their very soul. So what was the plan? How do you fight back against a giant? Well, Lachit Borphukan knew he couldn't win a conventional fight. No way. He was a brilliant strategist who got that to beat an empire, you don't fight on their terms. You force them to fight on yours. I mean, the challenge he was up against was just immense. Look at this mismatch. The Mughals rolled in with a professional army. We're talking over 30,000 infantry, 15,000 archers, and a cavalry of 18,000 horsemen. The Ahoms, they basically had a militia, but Lachit knew they had a few aces up their sleeve. They knew the local terrain inside and out, they were great at guerrilla tactics, and crucially, they had a small but very powerful river navy. His entire strategy was going to hinge on those three things. And his whole plan centered on one single place. Guwahati. It was a geographical masterpiece of a trap. See the hills all around it? They made the Mughal cavalry, their biggest strength, completely useless. This forced the entire imperial army onto the Brahmaputra River, which right at that point happened to be at its narrowest. This was the key. It meant the big, clumsy Mughal warships couldn't maneuver. They were basically sitting ducks for the smaller, quicker Ahom boats, which could just swarm them. And to make it even worse for them, Lachit built massive earthen walls to funnel the Mughals right into this naval kill zone. Genius. Now, to pull all this off, Lachit demanded absolute, ironclad discipline. There's this one famous story about him, right? He ordered a critical defensive wall to be built, like overnight. He put his own maternal uncle in charge of the job. But when he came back and found his uncle slacking off, he didn't even hesitate. He beheaded him, right there on the spot, and said, "My uncle is not greater than my country." It's brutal for sure, but it sent a very clear message to everyone. Failure is not an option. So for 2 years, the Ahoms used hit-and-run tactics, strategic delays, anything to wear down the Mughal forces. But by March 1671, the time for stalling was over. The final, decisive battle could not be avoided. This was the moment of truth at Saraighat. And the stakes were just terrifyingly high, because the Ahoms had learned a very, very bloody lesson just 2 years earlier at a place called Alaboy. They were lured into a straight-up fight on open ground, and they were annihilated. 10,000 Ahom soldiers were killed. That disaster proved beyond any doubt that Lachit's strategy of avoiding a land battle was their only path to survival. Okay, so as the final Mughal naval attack kicks off, the situation is a complete catastrophe. The Ahom soldiers see the size of the imperial fleet, and they just start to lose their nerve. Some of their boats even start retreating. And as if things couldn't get any worse, their leader, the one man holding this whole thing together, Lachit Borphukan, is basically on his deathbed, burning up with a terrible fever. From his sickbed, Lachit sees his army breaking. And in what has become one of the most legendary moments in military history, he just refuses to lie down. He tells his men to carry him onto a warboat, and as he's being rowed into battle, he yells this at his retreating soldiers. He was basically saying, "I'm going to die fighting, what about you?" And that was it. That was the spark. Seeing their general, sick but absolutely defiant, leading the charge, it electrified the Ahom soldiers. The retreating boats spun around. They smashed into the Mughal fleet with this incredible new fury. They used their knowledge of the river to outmaneuver and surround the enemy ships. In the chaos, the Mughal admiral gets killed, and their whole command structure just collapses. The supposedly invincible Mughal army was completely routed. So, the Battle of Saraighat was over. The Ahom Kingdom was saved. But the story doesn't end there, not by a long shot. The impact of this one victory has been echoing for centuries. Tragically, Lachit Borphukan never really recovered from his illness. He died just a year later. But his sacrifice was absolutely not in vain. Even though the Mughals managed to retake Guwahati for a little while after he died, the spirit of resistance he'd ignited was just unstoppable. His victory at Saraighat was the critical turning point that led to the Mughals being permanently kicked out of the region a decade later. He secured his kingdom's future. And his legacy today? Oh, it's immense. Every single year, his birthday is celebrated as Lachit Divas in Assam. Since 1999, the best graduating cadet from India's prestigious National Defense Academy gets the Lachit Borphukan Gold Medal. And there's a massive 150-foot statue being built to honor him. He's become this timeless symbol of courage, of strategic genius, and of that unbreakable will to defend your home against all odds. Which kind of brings us to a final, bigger thought. The story of Lachit Borphukan is way more than just a history lesson, right? It's a reflection of the values a nation chooses to celebrate. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? How do the heroes we choose to remember, the strategists, the rebels, the defenders, end up shaping who we are and what we believe is possible, right here in the present?